Welcome to Sacred Rebellion. I'm Kim Andryc.
And I'm Lora Solomon. In this podcast, we defy convention and shatter the stereotypes of what it means to be healthy and holy.
It's time to rebel.
Let's do this. Coming up on this episode, Kim.
Laura, this is right up your alley, girl.
I love stories, and what girl doesn't love a good fairy tale?
I mean, I love a good fairy tale.
So I'm excited about our guest today.
Yes, me too. So welcome, Laura Lewis-Barr. Laura was a graduate student in clinical psychology, but eventually switched majors and earned her Master's of Art in theater.
Yeah.
In 2019, Laura began making stop motion films focused on fairy tales. Now she is an award-winning stop motion filmmaker and educator.
And her focus is on animating fairy tales and mythic stories that feed the soul. I love that. She is inspired by the work of Joseph Campbell, Carl Jung, and Michael Meade. Made in her basement in Chicago, these films, her Laura's film screening events are filled with heart and questions for the soul. They're really fun. I was checking them out a little bit earlier.
Yeah, me too.
So welcome, Laura.
Thank you. Thank you.
So excited to have you on the Rebellion.
Thank you.
Yes. Yeah. Owning your own story is the most rebellious thing you can do, right?
Right.
So true.
Especially
so true.
Women. Yeah, I mean, when I was familiarizing myself with your work, I became aware, but I didn't know at first, what are stop motion films? Let's start there.
Stop motion are made by individual photos, stills that are put together to make the characters move. So I originally started because I bought myself a camera and wanted to make a film, and I wanted to learn the camera. And so I didn't want to make actors watch me try to figure it out. So I got these dolls. They were super patient with me. And I fell in love with the whole stop motion world.
Very good.
Yeah. So you're like a little like another girl playing with her dolls, just having fun.
It's so true. And I get to buy all the Barbie accessories and the Barbie furniture, and yes,
I had the Barbie, the 3-story Barbie penthouse. Is it the Barbie penthouse that had the elevator?
Yeah.
But I was always breaking the elevator because I would yank on it, and then it would Barbie would be shot up out of the top and come over.
True rebellion. They're true rebellion.
She's been a rebellion since childhood.
I had the bathtub too. Do you remember the bathtub where it had the little pump and you can make it bubbles? The bubble bath come over the top. Yeah, my Barbie had it going on.
I'm telling you. One of the things about fairy tales that that I find interesting, especially since, Carl Jung was such an inspiration to you, is, one of the things that I find frustrating with popular fairy tales anyway, is just these very siloed roles that women are often given, right? You've got the the old wicked woman and this innocent, princess that needs to be rescued and relies on a man to come and take care of her. And so tell me a little bit about, your perspective on kind of the archetypes and the fairy tales.
Wow, great. I think Disney did us a number, because if we go back and read the Grimm tales, for instance,
they're very rich,
and we find a lot more heroines, and they're clever and they're rebellious, and they turn the tables on the oppressor quite often in these tales. So I think our version of fairy tales, because a lot of it is because Disney, he brought them forward to our consciousness. Those early works were very 1950s female tropes,
Mhm.
themes, and I think we're recovering from that now. But the original tales weren't that way.
Yeah. So, is it Clarissa Pigcolte's Estate? I'm totally screwing that up. But women who run with the wolves.
Exactly.
When I read that book and she took these fairy tales and pulled them apart and really went into that deeper meaning of what is it communicating to our psyche? What is it activating? It was such I still love that book. It's like a textbook of the psyche almost, if you think about it that way.
Absolutely. I think it changed a lot of our lives. I have the same experience of it. I had these aha moments about my own life through the fairy tale. And I think that's what can happen for us. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And I was looking also at some of your work. You do a lot around emotional intelligence. So
Yeah,
what is the connection between the emotional intelligence and fairy tales? Like, how did that come into being?
I think fairy tales originally were sort of bringing out the wisdom of the common people, what they were learning about how to live in a world that was, Hansel and Gretel, that story was showing how life really was. There were people too poor to feed their kids, to take care of their kids. Fairy tales are trying to figure out, how do we live in the world? So I think they have a lot of wisdom in them. And then my background as an educator, and I was teaching emotional intelligence, I started to go, what if kids were looking at these kinds of films and pulling out what was intelligent? What were the intelligent actions in them? So I guess I'm always going to be an educator at heart. And so that was, if you saw that on my website, that's where that came from.
Yeah. I'm especially interested in stories related to trauma. Because what I observe in myself and people that I work with is when there's a traumatic event, there is a story that is imprinted deeply in the psyche about oneself, especially if there was an experience of being overwhelmed and helpless, and also a story about the world at large. And the power of being able to change that story about oneself and the world at large seems to be such a big part of truly kind of claiming one's power after a traumatic event.
Donald Kalshed, the Jungian therapist, he has written just the quintessential book on this. And now the name is escaping me and I'll have to look it up. But Donald Kalshed, and he takes clinical stories of his clients, and their dreams are very fairy tale like, and looking at fairy tales from trauma, from that focus of trauma. Very cutting edge work he's doing. Yeah.
Awesome. I'm going to check that out.
Yeah.
It might be similar to what I'm doing, because it's owning the power of the whole story. Because a lot of times the tendency is like, oh, that's too dark, that's too painful. I want to put that in a closet, lock it away, and I don't want it to be part of who I am. So some amount of, when a person is ready, bringing it out and really owning the story is really what it is.
And I'm now remembering one of the fairy tales is Rapunzel that he talks about. And he talks about how the witch who puts the woman Rapunzel in the tower is represents a part of us that takes another innocent part of us and stores it away, right, to protect us from further trauma.
Yes.
Right. And how we have to negotiate with that witch part, because if we don't, then we can lose a part of ourselves that witch is trying to protect.
Yeah. So the witch is a protector.
Right.
Who then ends up getting a bad rap.
Right.
Right. Right. She gets framed and she's evil. And then we have to, in a lot of the stories, you want to kill the witch.
Right.
But what you're saying is in a healing fairy tale, you appreciate the witch, you honor
Yes.
the witch, and you negotiate with her.
Well, and
Right.
it also sounds like in the fairy tale, like in dreams, every character represents an aspect of ourselves.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Right? And to categorize one as right and wrong or bad and good or whatever can cut us off from understanding a deeper aspect of ourselves.
Yes, it's true. And there are parts of the collective unconscious or ourselves that we want to be cautioned to be careful of. Like there are books that I admire very much about how evil is represented in fairy tales. They're cautionary tales so that we recognize how to deal with evil in ourselves and evil in the world.
Do you have an example of one of those?
Yeah, I was going to say, let's take a fairy tale and let's take Snow White.
Well, actually, if I could give you a different example.
Okay.
There's a grim tale called The Two Travelers. And I've been working with this tale recently. And it's this happy-go-lucky traveler guy. He's a tailor. And he meets up with a shoemaker who's a very kind of dour, kind of shut down person, and they travel together. The tailor, they're going to the king, and the tailor is so optimistic about life that he doesn't bring enough food for the journey. The shoemaker is a cruel guy, and he demands to cut out the eye of the tailor in exchange for some bread. And that happens twice, and then the tailor is blind. I've been working on this tale and reading a book about it, and I started to recognize in myself when I give away my vision because I've lost faith that I'm going to be okay, and I trade my vision for something that is not good for me. In fact, I was starting to recognize an unhealthy relationship in my life, and that fairy tale guided me through how to manage that relationship. It was like a dream. It was remarkable to me. And I can't promise everyone will have that aha moment. I've had it, I think, twice in my life. When you have that moment with a dream or a tale, it's grace. It's amazing.
Yeah. And that story, I was thinking of some other fairy tales. What's the one where the girl gets invited into the gilded carriage or is that the one? Thinking of the one in Women Who Rub with the Wolves. There was another one where the girl trades something for those shoes, the red shoes, and then she can't stop. But it's the idea of trading something, of not knowing some of the true value, right, of your vision or your body or yourself, and then feeling desperate and trading something of true value for something of either no value or passing value.
Exactly.
Right. And then not being able to get it back.
Yeah. Or it's a long journey to get it back. I'm always struck by the fairy tales where the parent makes the bad deal with the devil and the kid has to work it out, like the woman without hands.
Yes.
That's a classic one.
Yeah.
Yeah. For our listeners who may not be familiar, can you just tell that story real quick?
Yeah. And that it's a familiar tale in that a desperate father makes a deal with the devil to get money, I guess. And the devil says, well, okay, but you have to promise me what is behind your shed or something. And the father thinks it's the goat or whatever, but it's his daughter. And the devil comes for her, but she's so good that he can't take her. And now I'm forgetting why, but she relinquishes her hands. Her father cuts off her hands, and then she spends a lot of time in the fairy tale, and she ends up getting them back. But again, what a provocative image of how, as women, we lose our ability to to grasp. We lose our ability to get it. We give up that reaching ability. And the sins of the parents are visited upon the children, and we have to work it out.
I think one of the things that Disney did is he kind of whitewashed fairy tales, and maybe we didn't want to realize almost kind of how horrific our human experience has been, and what sacrifices parents have had to make, or have chosen to make, including sacrificing their children for survival. And it's so horrific to even allow that into our consciousness, but it is our history. Like, it has happened.
Right.
And it still happens.
Exactly. And I'm struck by, and I've been reading about how, we think about child abuse as sort of a recent horrific thing, but
no.
Oh my gosh.
Exactly.
It's better now than ever.
Ever.
But the fairy tales were warning even children, like the whole subject of, should children read these horrific tales? Well, they were teaching those kids how to be smart, how to be active. Hansel and Gretel is a great tale of, how to take on those predatory people.
Yeah.
Not literally, but, in terms
It's
of
almost like it offers hope. Like there is an escape. There could be an escape from a terrible, terrible situation.
Exactly.
And a lot of times in the story, there's some human ingenuity, there's some creative, right? It taps into this unique human ability of creativity.
Right.
And kind of being in a overwhelmingly devastating situation, and then somehow the spark of creativity or imagination comes through.
Right.
Yeah.
So let's say, a person does have a history of trauma, and they get attracted to using fairy tales or this as some kind of a healing. Like, how would they go about doing that?
Yeah. So first of all, I'm not a therapist, so I'll have to really start with that. And there are these wonderful books that help, that Donald Kalsched, Kalsched.
Yeah.
His book is great on trauma. I think, like working with a dream, I guess I'd be watching for what is evoked in me in the tale. Like, what a question I'd love to ask is, where am I at in the tale right now? Where am I at? Am I the one that's giving up my eyesight? Am I the one that's taking someone else's sight? I mean, who am I aligned with? And so that's one beginning thing. I think to dream it forward. So to take a story that maybe feels incomplete and go, well, what could I do next? What might happen next? That could be a way of almost lucid dreaming the tale.
Yeah. I mean, storytelling as a modality for healing, we don't really think about it so much. But it is a very powerful tool, because it starts to activate, like I was saying in the story, this imagination and the creativity, because even if you read a story and you're trying to figure out who you are in the story in this moment or who you have been, you're using your imagination, you're using your creativity, you're thinking about yourself in a different way. So already it's inviting you to use an ability to start thinking about yourself in a different way.
Yeah. And to invite the unconscious as a partner to reveal so when I have a dream, it's revealing what's happening in my psyche that I'm not conscious of. I think a fairy tale, the same way as I engage with it, it's an irrational form of a story, right? It doesn't make sense. It's inconsistent, but it invites, I think, that unconscious part. And one thing about the Grimm tales, a lot of tales, but there's often a character they call the dumbling, the character who's just not very bright, not as bright as anybody else, not as talented, sometimes super lazy. And yet that character is the one that wins the day, wins the kingdom. And to me, that's about how our unconscious is the leader. Like in those tales, he gets on his horse and the horse takes him where he needs to go, or he throws a ball and he follows the ball. Like he isn't so willful the way our egos can think we know what to do.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah.
Me too. I was perusing some of your films, and one that I really appreciated and seems so, and I mean, you recently made it, so it makes sense. It seems so, appropriate for our time, was the old woman knitting the garment of the world. And just this sense that this knitted garment has been pulled apart, and the film, you point to disease and, pandemics and war and division. And this woman sits down to reassemble the world, to knit it back together again. And, Laura and I on this podcast talk a lot about creating a new earth and, transitioning from 3D to 5D. So it just seemed to sing that song in a really pretty beautiful way. So tell us about, kind of your favorite or a couple of your favorite fairy tales that can be helpful to a hurting world right now.
Whoa. Okay. Well, a classic tale that I made a while ago, I call The Linguist, but it's based on a Grimm tale called The Three Languages. And in it, it's originally a hero, but I've made it into a heroine. She, yeah, I'm a rebel. She learns the language of the frogs, the dogs, and the birds. And the question I might ask first is, well, what does that mean? What does it mean for us to learn the language of the dogs and the frogs and the birds? Because to me, that's super provocative. And there's even just a lot to unpack there about a lot of things.
Yeah, like
you have any thoughts?
Seeking to understand those who are different.
Okay. Yeah. Like the world beyond just our world. Yeah. The ecological world.
Yeah.
Yeah. And for me, what comes up is recognizing all living things as intelligent and having something to say, and the value of being in conversation with non-human living things, that what they would say and why, that's what comes to me when I think about that.
I love that. And for me, there's also just the parts of me that are in the muck, and the parts of me that want to fly, and the parts of me that are part of the doggy tribe. I mean, I think that it does represent parts of me too. I think what's fascinating is at the end of that tale, the heroine, as in all weird fairy tales, she's asked to be the Pope. She's like, I can't be the Pope. And the birds say, we're going to sit on your shoulders and we will sing the mass. And you can, you'll know how to do it then. I was asked by the Jungian Center of the state of Maine, the Maine Jung Center, to do a program for them. And I said, I can't. And the guy who was talking to me, who had seen that film, said, you're having the experience of the film right now. And I said, oh my God. So it's so crazy how unconsciously all this stuff is happening. And I'm half the time not even aware of what I'm making or what deeper messages are always kind of floating around in these. They're filled with wisdom, I think.
Yeah. And just the simple framework of the hero's journey is endlessly fascinating to me because it's so useful. One, I mean, you can just put it out for somebody and say, where are you right now? And people can almost always spot themselves, like, oh, they recognize and they can see this is where I am on this journey. Like when you were saying that, I was like, oh, that's the call to action and the refusal of the call.
Exactly.
Right? And it's what every heroine does. It says, oh, no, I'm not, no, pass. I'm not doing that. This lack. And it's like, just to understand, that's completely normal. That's what we all do. Initially we say we have this sense of who, me?
I can't do that.
No, just pick her. She can do this. She's more qualified,
Exactly.
and how we can get stuck, especially as women, right? Always thinking we don't know enough or we can't do enough and not stepping into what we're being asked to do.
Right. And I love the hero's journey. For me, it gives my suffering meaning.
Mm-hmm.
Because otherwise, it does feel meaningless. But if it's part of a journey toward a treasure, an inner treasure or whatever,
then it's like exciting, right?
Oh, yes.
I'm on an adventure.
Yes. It's somehow worth it because there will be some huge gift at the end. And that gift not only serves me, but it serves everybody.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. I mean, that's the beauty about that too, and that's the story of every, hero's journey. It starts out with, you think it's all about me.
Yeah.
Right? That's the motivation. And then it's like, oh, this is a we thing, not a me thing. Okay. But you don't even the hero doesn't really get it until later in the story.
Yeah.
But I find when I work with people, if I remind them of that, even from the beginning, this is not about you.
Mm-hmm.
It seems to wake something up in them a little bit, like, oh, okay, this is bigger than me.
Right. Which is why we need these fairy tales and myths, because we need to be reminded that we're part of a bigger story. Yes. I think our culture just takes us out of that too fast.
Yes. Yeah.
And we all want to serve. I also teach public speaking, and I talk to people terrified, and it's like, this is your chance to serve.
Mm-hmm.
We need to, we all are hungry to serve.
And it changes the energy, right?
Exactly.
It changes the energy and those people, I'm sure, because when I am being of service, it's not scary. It's not really scary at all. It's like, it's humbling and gratifying. And, when you're speaking and you think that somehow the people who are listening to you are being of service to you, it's like, gosh, I just don't want to disappoint and I don't want anybody yawning. And
Yeah.
Big difference.
Yeah.
And you show up differently when you're focused on what do I have to give versus what do I have to get in like in the way of applause or appreciation or people thinking I'm smart or good or whatever. I know something. It's like, I'm not here to get, I'm just here to give. And then you can always be happy with your effort.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Yeah. So much in these fairy tales.
Yeah,
It's
so
true.
good. And it's so beautiful that this is your work. how did you come up? I mean, how did this whole thing start for you? I mean, the making of the films and
Right. I was doing theater for a long time and trying to break through. I was teaching, directing, and then one of my plays got made into a film. And I was like, wait a minute, what? Now it exists forever, not like a play that ends.
Right.
So then I bought a camera and thought I was going to start making some films. And then I wanted to learn the camera and bought the dolls. Meanwhile, I was always studying Jungian psychology. And really, this marriage of the tales with the dolls, that was when things went, what? And then the pandemic happened. I started before that, but I lost really all my work during the pandemic. And so I just literally was in my basement every day working on these films because, what are you going to do? You got to do something.
yeah.
And yeah, it feels like the marriage, I am living this integration of my background in psychology, which I always wanted to do, but didn't. And then my theater work, and then
Storytelling.
and not having a gatekeeper anymore, that I can just make whatever I want.
Yes.
What? That's been amazing. And I'm sure as podcasters, you have that experience. Like,
Yeah.
wait, we can do whatever we want.
We can say whatever we want and
we can
talk to whoever we want.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
We can just talk to ourselves. It's fine.
As we're trained, to kind of wait for permission. It's amazing to, but
Yeah,
also scary.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, because there's nobody who's going to pat you on the head and say, good girl, you did exactly what you were supposed to do. I mean, so then that has to all come from inside.
Exactly.
Well, and there's so much uncertainty. I mean, when you're employed by somebody, you get a paycheck every so often. And
right.
yeah, there's a lot of uncertainty.
And there's a lot in my world, a lot of rejection. I'm sending them out to festivals, and this been a good summer for festivals for me, but there's still a lot of rejections. That's hard.
You're going to get, you're going to get told no a lot more than you're told yes.
Yes.
And that once for me, I'll just say as long as I can, the work that I need to do about that is realize it's not about me.
Yeah.
So even though they're rejecting me, right? And especially when you're doing something creative, right? You put all this effort into putting it, giving birth to it, it's out into the world and you put it out there. And then people are like, nah.
Exactly.
Like, what?
Exactly.
My heart and soul, I just slit my wrists and bled onto the paper for you. And now you're like, nah, pass. What? But it's just part of it.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I was like, why is that part of it? And I do think it is part of the hero's journey Joseph Campbell talked about how the threshold guardians at the beginning of a journey that try to stop you from the journey, they're making sure you're really ready. And
they're mostly inside your head.
Sometimes,
yeah.
Sometimes I remember when I was producing theater, I'd always encounter these bureaucrats who made my life. And when I framed them as the threshold guardians, that really helped me not go so nutty.
I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. And in the hero's journey, you're going to be tested and you're going to have allies and you're going to have enemies. So then when you're being tested, you don't go into that place of, oh, poor me, or I did something wrong, or I'm off track. You're like, no, this is where I am in the journey. I'm going to be tested. Oh, great. Okay. I see where I am on the map.
Let me call an ally.
Yeah. And let me see who my allies are. And let me realize that the people that are testing me are really making me stronger. And I'm honing, it's honing me and making me better. Instead of, I'm not saying I never fall in self-pity. So let's be real here, but I at least have this framework that I can pull out and kind of catch myself.
Yeah.
I'm very impressed. It's taken me so many decades to get to what you're talking about. That's beautiful.
Taking me a lot of decades too.
Well, Laura, are you ready for the lightning round?
Oh, yes, I am.
Yeah. Okay, good. First question, what rules have you chosen to rebel against on your journey to health?
Perfectionism. And I coach the people who want to be great speakers to give that one up too. It's deadly.
Deadly.
I can relate to that one.
Me too.
All right, Laura, what does it mean to you to be holy?
I think Joseph Campbell is my icon here. It's to be whole. So to embrace my shadowy parts and go, all right, this is me too. I'd like to deny it, but no, it's me too. And that makes the world safer for everyone if I embrace my wholeness.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're the witch and the rescuer.
Right.
The princess. What do you want to say to a listener right now to help them rise up?
I would say to take all your parts seriously and to think about what you're dreaming at night. Maybe write it down. Dreams are the portal toward connecting with God. That's what I would say.
Beautiful.
Thank you. Now, how can our listeners find you?
Maybe the easiest way is my name. So Laura, Laura, Lewis, Lewisbarr, Barr, films, Laura Lewis-Barr films.com. That's probably the easiest.
Thank you.
And we'll have that in our show notes. And so people will be able to get a hold of you if they would like to.
Yay.
And thank you for reminding us of the healing power of fairy tales today, Laura.
Thank you. Wow, this has been amazing.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Sacred Rebellion. We love connecting with you in this way. If you want to join the rebellion and enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to Sacred Rebellion.
Give us a rating and review, and please recommend us to your tribe. Follow us on social media at Sacred Rebellion Podcast on Facebook and Instagram.
Until next time, stay curious,
Stay courageous, and most of all, stay rebellious.